And here we go. So welcome to week 3, unit 3, pillar 3 of the Open Flip MOOC, our English version. Here comes Daniela. She heard me talking her name. And there comes Durley as well. Perfect timing. So welcome. I'm just doing the welcome for both Durley and Daniela that we're in unit 3. I won't go and screen share this time. I don't think it's necessary. The people that have watched the previous videos have seen the previous videos. If you go to theopenflip.com/summer 2020, unit 20 or unit 3 looks the same as all the other ones in terms of structure. It's just the 3 assigned readings / videos that I assigned. 2 are classics from John Bergman, and actually I'll kind of share them for Kate's sake, because I'm sure she hasn't seen this. The ones I shared were the 5 mistakes to avoid when flipping your class, which is a post by John from like 7 years ago, which are: keep your videos short, don't assume all students have internet at home, don't lecture if students don't watch your videos, hold each student individually accountable for their work, teach students how to watch your videos, and then more, and he points to some more posts. And then the other post I shared, which was another one of John's, was the Flip Learning Toolkit, overcoming the common hurdles. What if students can't access the internet? It talks about what if students simply don't know how to watch an educational video? And I've been talking a lot about that this week, where we really need to model how we interact with content. This was during my EduCoffee sessions, where we have these kind of off-the-wall conversations about stuff. So how do we teach them to model? And seeing Kate in my window right now makes me think of when I was at previous FlipCons with her and in a class with Troy Cockrum. And I remember Troy talking a lot about teaching his students how to interact and watch a video, as opposed to just getting popcorn and watching a video. So there was that John talked about. What if students blow it off and just don't watch the content at all? What do we do? What if you don't feel confident in making your own videos? And what if you don't even know where to start with your stuff? So that was the other thing from John. And then another one, which was an older Edutopia post by Andrew Miller from 2014, has a classic video from Sir Ken Robinson, rest in peace, of teachers are like gardeners, and talking about that metaphor: empowering yourself, stop blaming the students, and we should really revise and reflect on the material that we share with our students. So those are the 3 pieces I shared, partially because that's what I shared 4 years ago, and I haven't had a lot of COVID-19 energy to finding the right videos. I know Kate and I are going to be talking about this because we're working on an upcoming course together with Edmodo and the Flip Learning Network on the Flip Pillars. So look forward to that, and Kate can get her pitch on that. We're not exactly sure on dates and things, I think, and we're working on collaborating in that with really soon. So with that, let me introduce Kate Baker. Is a good friend of mine since, oh my goodness, we met in person at FlipCon in Mars, Pennsylvania, and I can't even remember which year that is, Kate. I think it's
I'm not good with
6 or
years,
7
Ken,
years ago.
so.
But I remember meeting Kate in the cafeteria of the school in Mars, Pennsylvania, where FlipCon was. And we hung out a lot, and Kate beat me by like 3 tweets or something in the competition of tweeting during FlipCon.
That's right. I
still
forgot
hold
about that.
And so we've been collaborating for a long time. Kate is a member of the Flip Learning Network Board of Directors, as am I. I'm no longer the chair. Matthew Moore is now the chair. I've released myself of those duties. And so we've done a lot of collaboration, and Kate and I joined each other in Bogota, where Burley's coming in from, for Flip Tech 2020. Not even a year ago, but it seems like a long time ago. So welcome, Kate, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ken. I'm happy to be here with everyone. It's always so gratifying to be able to use technology to connect from all over the world. You know, that's just been one of the amazing things about flipped learning and the whole flipped community, that, you know, I first found them through Twitter way back when, and just happened upon a conference that was going on where they were live streaming it. And then in the back channel was Andrew and Cheryl, who were having a conversation on Twitter. and I, said hi to them, and they introduced me to the Flip Class hashtag, and then, then the chat, and then it was like, oh my gosh, these are my people.
Yeah.
And have, realized like, oh, this is what you call what I've been doing in my classroom, whereas other teachers might have labeled me as crazy for doing more student-centered, and I was always, but it was finding ways to have my students engage with the content. So it's been a wonderful ride to be able to work with you, and then also like, hi Durley, good to see you in person, or through the screen. It's nice to see you, as well as see everyone else here, and make some new friends.
Good. So welcome as well, Daniela and June and Viviana and Durley. Thanks for coming again. I was commenting to Durley today in EduCoffee. It's interesting that the English group is kind of this small group. It's like my EduCoffee sessions. It's just like 4 or 5, 6 people, whereas the one on Thursdays, crazy and active, and there's like 45 educators show up for my Zoom session, and it's a totally different environment.
That's
it's quite
awesome.
Interesting how the two are different, but I think it talks about how kind of my reach out to people has much more need or touch here in Mexico, especially. Most of them are from Mexico, but there's other people from other parts of Latin America joining us, like our friend Daniela here, who's coming in from the south in her winter.
Where are you located, Daniela?
Okay, there I am. Hello, I'm in Argentina, in La Plata, Buenos Aires.
Nice. I have friends in Argentina. My friend Lydia is a teacher there, and then our buddy Miguel Sadoff, who's the Minister of Education now, Ken?
Yeah, of what's the state called?
Misiones.
Misiones. He's the Director of Education for the state of Misiones. Yeah.
Right.
Good.
Nice.
So he was at it joining us last year at the conference in Bogota. Nice. And then we have June coming in from the other side of the world completely, and Viviana and I here in Mexico. So it's I think the Wednesday session is the international session for sure. This is great. So did anyone have thoughts they wanted to share? I brought Kate in to talk about intentional content, and on the pre-show I talked about how for me it was kind of the pillar I didn't get at first. I kind of got the other ones obviously on the flexibility and the learning culture and the professional educator. All that kind of made sense to me, but for some reason I think that the I in the intentional content didn't jive with me so much. And then Kate maybe reflected on the fact that as a professionally trained educator, because most of you took education degrees, whereas I didn't. I'm a university professor who studied computer science, and I'm graduate degrees in computer science, and then started teaching. I didn't really have a training background in education like most university teachers. So maybe that was why it was the kind of weird pillar for me. So I was going to throw it out there. Maybe Daniela or Durley or Viv or June have some thoughts on this week's topic.
Oh, Junior.
Well, I don't know if I should start or yeah.
Do you want to talk, June?
Yeah, no, I am not also an education graduate because I took a degree in Bachelor of Pure Mathematics. So that would be teaching college students. But a year later, after 3 years, I took up another course for some random reasons. Took what we call here a Magna Carta for teachers. So I can teach students from high school and even elementary. So I don't have any idea about the topic for today.
Okay.
Yeah. So
did you want to add on, Daniela?
Well, I was thinking about intentional content. I found it I found it very interesting the way it can match and complement the other pillars that we were talking about. So talking about learning culture last week, I think that this is pretty much connected. So I think that it is connected to the fact that we might decide, I mean, we go back to what we were saying about belonging to an institution and not completely deciding on what we teach. So, but in many cases, or at least that's my case, we are told what the content should be, but on the macro level. I mean, it's general. So then we can narrow it down in different ways and taking different perspectives and things.
Right.
So we can accommodate kind of things like different ways. Now, what I was thinking about it with intentional content was, well, that selection that we do, that cutting of things that we do, and leaving it open for students to say, well, this is some selection I've done. I mean, really I'm copying what you do, offering us a couple of things, right? And then saying, well, there's much more to be said about this, but well, at least I guide you through here, then you can move on, right? And so I compared it with telling students that they need to get to a certain point, give them a map, and then some clues. And so, Will, now find your way. I'm not giving them a GPS that tells them, well, go ahead, turn left, and go ahead again, and then take a right, and there you'll find where I want you to get. It's kind of, well, see the clues, and within those clues, we need to see that some students get different kinds of clues, and some students need more clues, and some others might need fewer clues, and some will get to the point where we want them to get easier, faster, and with fewer problems, and some others are going to be winding around in a path until they get there. So that's the metaphor I got from this intentional content.
Nice.
You bring up a good point about the students being able to codify or make sense of the content that they're given. And it reminds me a lot of like constructivism, that, you know, we can supply students with various, you know, things to interact with, but ultimately they have to be the ones to literally construct their learning and to integrate that into their own brains, and to have that information be coded into their brains for the long-term memory. So, and yeah, there's plenty of kids who do things differently, you know, that it's not always the same pathway for this, you know, which is, I know a lot of teachers like differentiation, and, you know, being able to provide like a menu to students, like if you're more of a visual person, do this. If you're more of an audio person, that. I always took the approach though of like, it might not sound very scientific, but a little bit of like spaghetti on the wall. Like, I'm just going to do a whole smattering of different techniques in the hope that everyone will be able to find their way, and
Right.
and to also not get stuck in a track, like to say like, this is my one way that I learn and that I'm not going to try something else. So by allowing students to engage in different modalities, I want them to yes, capitalize on their strengths, but I also want to provide them with opportunities to build on their weaknesses and to strengthen skills that they might not have necessarily. So like the intentional content isn't always just like the stuff, the what. A lot of it too is the how we engage with it. And whether it's, you know, am I listening, am I talking, am I writing, you know, and thinking of a skills-based approach or a standards-based approach, but essentially not looking at content as something that's like two-dimensional, but really looking at that it's multi-dimensional and has many facets to it, that we can approach content in that way.
Right. Right. Viv or Durley, you got some thoughts?
Well, I
Maybe.
think that I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Durley.
So, well, what I see about intentional content is, for example, when we know that our students need certain knowledge, over the other, because sometimes we have like lots of things to cover in the curriculum, but some of them just our students can learn through the way. I mean, so for example, in my case, in this moment, I'm teaching modal verbs, but there are other topics that are implied in modal verbs. But I am not going to be focused on those details, but just like in the big one. So that's what I have seen and what I have reflected about intentional content. Something that helps the students to be really help them to communicate in their foreign language. I'm not sure if that's the intentional content.
Okay. Viv?
Well, I am probably the nemesis of Daniela and Dirty because I know they're English teachers and I'm always committing grammar mistakes, so please. Well, for me, intentional content, it's a matter of alignment of content to learning objectives. This is, well, I am an instructional designer. Some people call it learning designer or simply course designer. So I work with teachers, and first, when they're going to design a course for the first time, they also think about content first, right? Right. And we have to convince them to not to do that by reflecting on what they want to, what they want to get right. With students, because just thinking of content, content can be a massive amount of information. Yep. And what do you really want to? What do you want from that content? You want your students to be able to recall that content, or write about it, or add what's specifically from their own, or to adapt it to, I don't know, to another format to be able to share it on social media, or we need some limits for the time that we are going to spend with the learners, I think.
And I love that point because I remember, Viv, where we work with instructional designers or in other facets at our institution, and they'd be trying to teach the teachers, the professors mostly, about, okay, well, let's think about your learning outcomes. We'd all be like, well, our learning outcomes is this list of content that we had. Most of the professors just didn't get it. It was my learning outcomes is that they know about all of this list of topics I have, and trying to change our mindset of what we wanted the students to come out of the course with was really hard for a lot of teachers, at least in our area, for sure.
I vividly remember this too, of like in my master's degree classes for instructional design, like when we would talk about, standards-based grading, because I was a high school teacher for 20 years and the curriculum was king. We were told, here are the books that you will teach. Yes, we can decide how we want to teach them, but these are the texts. So I've always started from a place of content first. And I vividly remember this, of trying to look at it from a skills-based or standards-based approach. I had to literally do this in my head of like, okay, here's the content, but I'm going to look at it like this. Like I had to literally make myself visualize myself looking at content from a different angle, and to almost flip a switch in my brain to say, okay, yeah, it's lovely that they could know these verbs or these characters, this information about this text, but it's, what do we want them to do with this? Okay, I'm going to look at this from another angle and look at it from you know, a skills
certain
approach.
context.
Yeah. Of, you know, being able to close read a text, or, you know, and again, it's like thinking of the eye as kind of like a camera lens. Like, yeah, we can look at content from a macro level, as Daniela said before. And oftentimes I think as teachers, we can be so in the micro level and the minutia of content that we do have to be able to zoom in and out to content from different angles, so that we can be intentional or delivering the content and having our students engage with it.
Cool. I was just catching up with June here, finding his Twitter handle so I could tag him here later. I got everyone else's in the room, so I like to make sure everyone's connected after the session. Yeah, for me, it's because now that I'm so much more focused on open educational practices and getting my students to think much more meta about their courses and not so focused on the content, has actually forced me to think about the content, because I want to spend more time going meta and having them make choices about their content and their own choices about it. I can be a little bit abusive about that with most of the courses I teach, because they're not really, like I was talking to Kate, when you're a university professor, if you're teaching Math 1, you're worried about that they got the basis so that they can go to Math 2 and go to Math 3. But in upper level software engineering courses or things that I teach, I'm not really prepping them for the next course. I can mold the course to what I think is the important concepts for them to prepare them for professional life. So my intentional is much more about trying to drive them to decide which areas of software engineering or computing security or whatever I'm teaching in that course that they want to either deep dive on. And I just had this conversation with a student this morning in one of my one-on-one sessions. He was saying, well, that on this one topic, I had a big interest and I really wanted a deep dive on it. But then the other one I wrote about, it was like, it's all about like standards and ISO numbers and things about, and I wasn't really that interested, but you know, I wrote about it and I decided, well, there's like 5 different standards we kind of need to know about. And I decided, I just decided a deep dive on one and name the others. And is that okay? And I said, of course that's okay. That's what I want. I want you to make the decision on what you think is important for you and decide that sometimes you need this wide knowledge of our field in certain areas. And then other ones you're going to dive deep because you really have an interest in it, because you already do, or it's something new to you and you've decided I'm going to jump into that. And so often I've pulled a little bit back, but I'm intentional content because I'm not driving the content to my students as much. So it's hard for me to think about it with the way I've been doing a lot more kind of meta level open educational practices with my students. So that's changed in my way of thinking. But when I'm doing, say, an introductory course, like I have a CS1 Computing 1 course, where intentional content comes into play a lot, is not giving them too much work to do, and especially busy work. And because I'm teaching courses, which I think is the hardest course to teach in all of university, and I'm not just saying that, it's because I have students like my 12-year-old son who will show up to university, and when he's taking a computer course, he's already been writing code for 12 years. And then he'll be sitting beside someone who's never coded before. So I have this massive difference in not knowledge, not intelligence, but experience level between my students. And I really got to be careful about not overloading the ones that need more time and not making the ones with lots of experience bored. So I really have to be tailoring the content to each student in those classes. It's really hard and really important, I think. So I've been thinking about it a lot over the last years. But when I first encountered the eye, I just didn't kind of get it. It didn't make sense to me. And I think it's because of my lack of the educational training in my background.
Could be. But so you said you found, which of the 4 pillars though was the easiest for you?
Oh, the flexibility one, definitely.
Now, see, that one was the hardest for me because,
Yeah.
and here's
for me
why,
too.
Yep.
because my classroom, like, I was so bound by
Mm-hmm.
the restrictions of like
Right.
the class period, the class schedule, even
Your
the
district
furniture.
definitions and
Right. So like I could be flexible with due dates to a degree. There were so many things that were out of my control that I was just like, well, it'll be what it'll be for this one.
yeah. It's interesting because I saw some pushback on, it was a parent who was obviously an educator, and we have this dilemma as educators who are parents, talking about her daughter got an absence because her internet went out that day on the first day of classes, and there was no connection to the class, and you know, losing points because you can connect. And then another student the next day, the webcam didn't work. They've reported to IT. They were working on it. But the teacher, you know, the rule is I have to mark you absent if I can't see you. And then there was a whole thread of pushback going on. But someone said, well, in an essence, I mean, that teacher might not feel comfortable because the rule is being set down from above on them that this is the rule.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else is saying, yeah, but any teacher worth their salt would actually make an exception to the rule. And I'm, yeah, but that comes from a privileged position where you're not worried about losing your job. And there's all sorts of things wrapped in about how we're being flexible or not
Mm-hmm.
based on our own circumstances as educators. And I've always had this kind of privilege of being the foreign professor here in Mexico, and I can get away with a lot of things that my colleagues can't. So for me, flexibility has always been part of my practice. And I'm
Yeah,
never
I always
worried
found
about it.
ways to try to like be flexible within the confines of
Right.
of my boundaries and restrictions, and to like, okay, break the rules or bend the rules, stretch my boundaries. And for the most part, you know, I was able to get, not that I was really doing anything wrong,
No.
but when you look at like where the top down, the leadership might be coming from, they're coming from a place of like surveying the scene and
Yep.
keeping an eye on all people. And so it's from a place of like security and control.
Mm-hmm. And keeping the ship
But
pointed in the right direction. And
right. And it's more about the ship functioning, but not necessarily understanding what is the best course or what is the best way to, you know, do some new innovations, like an investment to bring the ship up to another level and then to steer the ship in a different direction.
Mhm.
Because if they're not in it and they don't understand it, and they don't own it, they also don't want to lead with that, you know?
Right.
So there's always this conflict that I faced because, you know, most of my administrators in the school that I taught at were all traditional teacher-centered classroom teachers. Right. Not a single one of them ever taught with technology. So here I am like, let's flip, let's do this, that, and everything else. And they're just like, you know,
what?
Horrified. They don't understand it.
Right.
And as much as I'm trying to teach them or trying to share with them as well. So not only was the intentional content for my students, but also trying to like show how I am being intentional with technology integration, and I'm not replacing myself with videos.
Right.
It's not what learning is.
No.
Like I am being very intentional and trying to educate them and show them that. They were so focused and busy on keeping the ship running that they didn't have the bandwidth, the cognitive space to be able to explore that option. And so that's always been hard, you know, is how can you show to those who aren't necessarily in the room with you, like that perspective that they understand what you're doing and that it is intentional and
Right.
that it is in the best interest of your students.
Yeah. And that brings up the video question. And we've always had that thing about the video. And I was reviewing the actual pillar and it surprised me because, you know, I haven't looked at it for a long time. I always look at Robert Talbert's definition of flip as well. And the second point here, and your kind of self-evaluation I'll read them all out. Is I prioritize concepts used in direct instruction for learners to access on their own. I create and or curate relevant content, in parentheses, typically videos, for my students. And the third one being I differentiate to make content accessible and relevant to all students. And there's that point about videos. And then there's, you know, Robert Talbert and me and other people keep railing on, no, you don't have to have videos to have flipped learning. And I think that always comes up, especially in the stereotypes of flipped learning. Because I got a negative comment on one of my shared videos from these sessions where, oh, we're just gonna turn the students into robots and replace all the teachers with videos. And I'm like, did you even watch the session? I mean, obviously you didn't, but oh well, it's YouTube comments. What can you expect? The commenter won't hear this anyway, because I'm sure they didn't watch the video. And I think it was on the Spanish one. But it's this obsession with that we need to use videos seems interesting too. Because I don't really use that much videos.
Yeah, and it's not only videos, but now with the pandemic, what I've seen is that many people try to do is to reproduce what we used to do face-to-face, but online. And I have been striving with authorities, because that's a problem. When you've got headmasters, headmistresses who push you to, you have to go online for 2 hours for all the classes, every class, all the time, and it's impossible to imagine 2 hours giving a lesson that is supposed to be a face-to-face lesson with the same content, with the same activities. I said, no, I mean, everything has to be changed. The activities that we design, the contents that we're going to provide, the connection, because being asynchronous does not mean that we're not being there. And it's still now in September, for us, almost finishing, still very difficult for authorities in general not to compare how much time we actually see our students live, let's say, to our lessons in general. So it's not only teachers, there are many authorities, many students as well. So but we have had like 5 lessons throughout the year. No, we have had 5 synchronous lessons, not 5 lessons. 5 Zoom meetings, but not 5 lessons. Right. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
And that I was really hopeful with despite the circumstances of the pandemic. I was really hopeful that this would provide us with an opportunity, that we could see the silver lining of this very dark cloud, but we could look at education and our system of education and to redesign it and redesign the definitions, because we can't just copy paste what we do face to face in person with our students and then turn that into a distance learning or hybrid format. Like we have to adapt, we have to change, and who's to say that like synchronous is better than asynchronous? Right? Like there's, when you think about like the value of our time and also the efficiency of our time and being able to connect with our students, like a one-to-many dynamic is not going to be very efficient. To say like, hey, I'm gonna run a class in an hour-long Zoom meeting with 30 students. That's actually worse than being in the room with my 30 students.
Oh, by far. And I was talking about that today, Kate, because for me, Zoom's not that, well, Zoom has advantages for me. Because for me, for coding and computer science, I can say, hey, Kate, can you share your screen right now? And I can see the computer code you're writing, and we can all see it at the same time. And it's even better than in the classroom, where my colleague, an architecture colleague, was telling me the difficulties she's having because she's teaching students to draw and do architectural drawings. And And in a classroom environment, you have this peripheral vision and you walk around and you can see who's stuck and who's not. And in this environment, we've lost that. We can't see what's going on for all of our students. It's this little viewport. Some of them don't have the cameras on. And in Zoom, I've got a class of 35 and I can't get them all on the screen at one time. I got to flip between two screens to see them all. So we have to let go of that ability. We can't rail against it. We can't fight it. This is our new reality if we're teaching in this method in a synchronous way. And we have to be intentional on how we're structuring exercises and that synchronous time, because we can't do it the same way. Even I can't do it the same way. I'm doing it differently, but I think it's easier for me to do differently. So I'm kind of talking from privilege that way. But many of my colleagues are really, really struggling because they're missing that, walking around the classroom and seeing how everyone's doing. It's hard.
Well, and there was very little professional development done in preparation for this. When I look at the springtime, it was, oh my God, let's react. We have to shift and pivot right now. So there was no time to prepare. But then this summer for us up in the North, in between school years, that here was an opportunity to let's do some research. Let's really invest. Let's do some design thinking. Let's think about the system and let's do something better and different and let's train people on it. But they were so focused, at least in the States, on, okay, we're going to do an in-person. Oh, no, wait, we're going to do hybrid. Oh, wait, no, we're going to go remote. Trying
do
to
all the things.
Right. Figure out what the plan was, that they couldn't get to a space where okay, let's pick the best plan and let's prepare our teachers for that. Everyone, even right now, everyone is still reactive. And I feel like they're also in a space where they're just waiting. Okay, we'll just make this work for now in whatever capacity it will be. Mm-hmm. And things will go back to normal when this is all over.
And it's the same as the classic flip, Kate, that we're trying. If we just try to replicate lecturing and classical learning in a flip method, it's just as, recording an hour-long video is just as bad as, speaking live. And doing it through a screen is just as bad as it was before. And trying to give high-stakes exams in a classroom was bad. And now it's worse because everybody's focused on how can we set up Proctorio and Respondus and all these invasive applications, which are horrible. And I don't want to go down that path because I'm so against it. Instead of doing better authentic assessment.
Right. Or even just we can look at the SAMR model here, Dr. Puritan, oh my God, Dr. Puritan Natura's EdTech integration model. So many folks right now, my colleagues, I love them, my former teacher colleagues when I was in the classroom, but I've gotten so many questions where they said, how can I take my paper worksheet, I scanned it, it's now a PDF, how can the kids fill this in? And I'm like, no, let's try something else.
My kids were doing stuff on the computer here, and they were printing it out so they could take a photo of it so they could send it via WhatsApp to their teachers. I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Yeah.
And then my own daughters right now, one's a freshman in high school, the other one is 7th grade. And a few of I've seen it already where the teacher is given an assignment and says, oh, you can print this out. Now you talk about privilege.
Right.
We are definitely
Not
in a
everyone
privilege.
has a printer.
I don't have a printer.
No.
I won't do it. Environmentally and, economically aside, I don't see the value of having a printer. So, I had to say to her, no, here, let me show you a different way to do this. You can still type your answers and submit it. We're not finding a printer for you to print this out, handwrite it, and then do the same thing. So, yeah. Ooh, June asked, how is assessment being done in Zoom? Is it prone to cheating if you're giving them the usual type of exam?
Yeah, it is. You can't check. I'm a security professor. So You can put all the controls you want on it, but if I'm here alone in my house, you're not going to know. And you're going to make it so restrictive that, for one, it's racially charged, because people with different skin colors will have problems with the auto face tracking. People that have, problems with their eyes and stigmatism and focusing and don't look and move their eyes normally will get flagged as cheaters. If I'm looking down at the keyboard to type because I'm not a touch typist like someone who went to high school in the 80s like Ken, you're going to get flagged. And so it's really, really bad. And my students have talked about this on Twitter, how their group were forced to use this proctoring software and a separate cell phone pointed at them with their camera on. And they were all stressed out completely about the exam. And another group didn't have to do this. And obviously, well, guess what? The other group did much better on the exam. And not necessarily because they were cheating, but because they weren't all stressed about, I got to stare into the webcam while I'm taking my exam. And I can't even look at the screen, because if I look at the screen, I'll stop looking at the webcam. And no, it doesn't work. So we need to rethink how to do assessments.
Well, and
but it's really hard. It's really hard.
Be creative. Like, if you can Google the answer, well, then
it shouldn't be on the test anyway.
Right.
Because my software engineers of course they're going to be Googling things while they're in the software engineering environment. I mean, that's not what I want them to be prepared for. I don't remember how to look up that function call. I'm going to look it up in the manual.
I don't remember everything all the time, but I can go, ooh, all right, I can't think of this answer off the top of my head, but I know what keywords I need to use to find that information and then to be able to apply it.
Yep. And so we need to test differently and not test memorization. And we've always tested what's easy to test. And that's part of the problem. Our tests sucked in the first place. And so they suck more when you switch it to an online environment. We were worried about the writing on their wrists in the 1980s. And now they're walking around with the internet and gigabytes in their pocket.
Control. It goes back to like control and really whose interests are you really, is that really in for?
And the students that don't have updated hardware and their machine slows down or it crashes. My son's computer crashed while he was using an exam the other day and using the lockdown browser from Respondus, and it locked up his computer and he had to hard power down his computer and then start it up again and tell his teacher that the computer locked up. And I've taught him enough to say, look, take a picture that your computer's locked up so you've got evidence, protect yourself, and you've got me behind you seeing that it happened that way. And a student with a not new computer, these are real, it's an access issue. So we need to not use that kind of stuff and be intentional about how we're assessing our students.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that what we're going through is making us think more about this intentional teaching and intentional content for sure.
Yeah, and I think that everything goes into the same idea of having active students who take responsibility for their own learning. So I go back to my metaphor. If my students get lost in the map that I gave them, it's because of them, not because the GPS that I would represent. Or I don't give them all the answers. So they have to find out what they have to learn, how they have to learn it. I mean, I'm there to guide them with the clues and with everything, but it's their own responsibility. It's very common nowadays to hear, or at least that's my experience. Well, I haven't been taught that. And I hate that. When students, particularly I teach at university, so they're not kids. So if you feel that you have not, you don't know something, you have to go and learn it. If you feel that some teacher did not test you on that, and so you passed the course, well, it's not their responsibility. So when I receive students that come from a previous subject that they have passed, but there's still something that they don't manage from a previous subject, they feel that it's not their fault. They feel that, well, I haven't been taught that. Say, well, yeah, but you're supposed to know it anyways. So, I think that this intentional content goes to show that we have to give them enough tools and to let them know that there are a lot more for them to get from that. And then it's up to them. Usually you have to be aware of what you need to be a future professional. So in my case, in which I teach.
Oh, did she lock up?
I think we lost Daniela. She's frozen, as my kids used to say when we'd be in chat with Grandma and Grandpa. Grandpa, you're frozen. Yeah, I think we lost Daniela. No, she was getting to the real point. She'll come back. She'll come back.
It reminds me of one of the other definitions that I would hear John and Aaron say at FlipCons is, it's about flipping the responsibility for learning from the teacher to the student. Like whoever's doing the most work is doing the most learning. So when
I agree with you.
That's always my definition of flip since about 5 years ago. That's the core for me. Go ahead, Dermot.
Yeah, make them to be responsible of their, And it's something that is really hard to change because, for instance, in Colombia, we tend to be so traditional in the classroom. So when you try to change the mindset, it's kind of difficult because for them it's really shocking, and for them, well, not for all of them, but some of them is like, no, teacher, I need you, and if you're not here, I'm not learning. So I don't know, changing that aspect is quite difficult because it's like, okay, baby, if you learn, it's because you have to make the decision of learning. But if you don't make the decision, because learning is a decision making, you're not gonna make it. So when they start understanding the responsibility, that the autonomy is like one of the key things in learning, we can flip easier and faster our classes. Because if not, it's gonna be like a really hard road to take. Because I'm living that with my class at this time. For example, I have a class at night, and they are older than the morning students. So for them, it's like the teacher should be present for us. So trying to change that mindset is quite difficult. It was, a guy told me last class, like, teacher, is the first time that a teacher told me that it's my decision to pass the course or not. And I say, yes, of course, it's your decision, it's not me. And I said, I can make like lots of fun activities and I can give you lots of tools, but if you're not responsible of that, I can't do anything for you. And they are like, okay, but they're not really sure about it yet. So it's difficult.
Yeah, it's, as we definitely see with online, that we want to move more towards asynchronous. That's part of this struggle as well, is the teacher's not there to hold your hand. I'm there when you need me. I'm there on demand when you need me, possibly synchronously together, but more likely you're sending me a message and I'm responding to you. But that, I struggle with that because that means the student doesn't do anything when the teacher's not in the room. Like they don't go home and do work on their assignments, or there's probably a whole bunch of things wrapped up there.
Well, and that's, one of the strategies I know from like elementary school is, ask 3 before me. If you don't know something as the student, find 3 other ways that you can go get that answer before you ask the teacher.
Right.
And so like they may do this in elementary school, but we know that students' brains are developing.
Right.
That even in the high school level, they're not done yet. And they're so,
university as well.
Yeah, they're not done yet.
Even me.
I don't think we're ever done. We're never done learning. But, just brain development in general, neuroplasticity, because the other thing we need to think about too is just trauma-informed education. And that also ties into the intentional content that, if you're in fight or flight mode, you don't have the neuroplasticity to retain the information.
Right.
So, as much as it's, again, like it's so complex what we get to do with our students.
This gets back to the respondus in the exam systems, Kate, and actually I'm just having a conversation on the side with a colleague that one of these platforms we're using for testing is broken and it's not working, it's had problems. And I said, I'm not going to use it this week for my exam. And he said, like, why? And he's kind of saying why, because he's the one who introduced the tool, probably. But my point is, my goal is to reduce the level of stress of my students during any kind of evaluation. And then I'm going to remove everything I can to remove that stress. And these other factors of a camera watching you and everything else is not helping them focus on demonstrating that they can do these practices that we're laying out for them in some kind of summative assessment.
It also makes me wonder too about their own self-esteem and their own self-confidence.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The reason that they don't take responsibility for their learning is because they're not confident in themselves.
Right.
You know, or
being wrong.
Right. Yeah. And being okay with being wrong. Like
it's normal.
They're so afraid of like, oh, I have to have the right answer. So I can't do any answer because I don't know what the right one is and I can't be wrong. And that culture of, and I saw that comment come in about failing. Where is it?
The side channel.
Yeah. Daniela said, reminds me of the idea of failing forwards.
Yes. Oh, yes.
We have to reiterate. We have to, that's why I love design thinking, because it's just so conceptual in let's play with this. Let's see what works. Let's reiterate. Let's try again. Let's make it better. Like, it's not just here's the right answer and we're done.
And it reminds me of that practice I used to do with my students. I haven't done this for a while, where I'd ask them at the beginning of the semester to stand up and shout out, it's okay to fail. And I'd record it. And I really wanted to point into them and that, no, it's okay to get it wrong. And I also have this practice that if they don't get the assignment right, they can use my feedback from the assignment and then hand it in again, and then hand it in again, and then hand it in again. And it's okay to get it wrong the first time, because I'm going to let them get it more right or less wrong or whatever, however you want to decide on that the next time. And so they have less fear of getting it wrong. I hope that's my goal with that system I'm using there.
You know, and that goes back to the cheating. Like, why are they cheating? It's because they need to find a way, because they can't be wrong.
No.
They want to be right. They're held to this standard, like, to be right the first time.
And if that exam is worth 50% of their grade, the stakes are so high.
The system doesn't do them any favors.
Yeah, I don't think, June, that it's a mathematics thing. I think there's a lot of cultural things. There's a cultural thing in countries. There's a cultural things in your school environment about how we do exams, and teachers saying, well, I learned this way and I took my exams this way, so you have to take your exams this way.
We only
and
know
a
what we
resistance
know.
to change. Yeah, it's not simple, and every
It's definitely part of the school culture.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and I never saw here a mathematics teacher doing a flip. It's because it's really hard to really apply flip on mathematics. So I don't know.
The right person to watch is the work of Crystal Kirch and some other colleagues that we have in the math area, and see what she was doing when she was flipping her classrooms. I'll dig out the link here in a second. But Crystal wrote a lot about this, and then she has her book.
Oh, you're going to get it.
Darn it, I can't find Crystal's book. It's here
somewhere. You don't have it right there?
There it is.
Can
Flipping with Kirch.
avail that?
Downs from inside.
Oh, I like
classroom.
that.
It's right there. It's got a signature.
Can
and
I
everything.
avail that?
Kate's got hers there somewhere. But yeah, Crystal did a lot of good work, and
How
she
much is that?
documented. What's that? I'll send you the link, June. But I'll send you a link to Crystal's
thank you.
website, because she did amazing work, and Crystal's a pioneer, and she's not in the classroom right now, but she documented everything she did. So yeah, math, I think you might think it's hard. And I've always said, people always say, oh, it's hard to flip my area. It's easier to flip another area.
Look
I
at
remember
these
John saying that too.
Khan Academy videos.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of basic mathematics for a statistics course I took.
Yeah.
Just with Khan Academy videos.
Yeah, the con stuff's great, and really the focus is getting back to what Kate said, is the flipping of the responsibility and making your classroom an active environment. You're not teaching mathematics in class. You're giving them space to apply mathematics in the classroom, and you're there to help guide them, and their colleagues are there to help to guide them. And Crystal talks about how she'd have people broke into different tables for different things they were working on. She had a whole plan. I mean, Crystal documents all the details of how she does things. She's amazing.
It's just about experiment. I mean, if you really want to flip, just try to include things like a station work, individual space, try to organize things. Yeah, because it's more like a decision making. I mean, I started doing that because of research. I was researching about flipped learning materials, designing materials for flipped learning, sorry. And I started doing so many things, and I realized that, okay, this works, and it helped me to be more relaxed toward my work.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, let's do this. And I have improved a lot my materials. So it's really interesting because it's not only about materials, it's also about learning communities. It's about building communities, because we can teach many things through flipped learning. It's not just about content. Yeah. What I have seen and I have tried to, regarding what Kate was saying, it's like including emotional things. Yeah. So we are including like meditation, mindfulness, giving them like funny videos to start the class. And that way you can engage students. So for example, I don't know, like start your class with a funny video about mathematics. And then you engage your students. And then you organize your class with the things you consider that are important for them. Because that's what intentional content is. What do really my students need to learn for life? It's not just for the course, it's not just for the grade, it's just for life. Yeah, because if we are learning something, it's because we need it. So it's just a decision making, I think. Yeah. I'm going to share with you some material. Maybe you can take ideas.
Thanks,
and you can plan your class based on that.
And it's important to know, and we always say this when we talk to people about flip, is you can't go, I'm going to teach exactly like Crystal Kirch or like Kate. You have to adapt what you're seeing from all these other people into your environment and your restrictions and your everything that's around you. You need to take and do what's best for your environment and what's best for your students. Because you can't do the same thing as what everyone else is doing, but you need to look and see what others are doing and adapt it to what works best for you, for sure. So we're pretty much out of time. I don't know if anyone had a last thought they wanted to add. Maybe Viv?
This conversation is really nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's been nice. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry, Daniela
you
dropped
recently
out.
mentioned individualization. And I remember when I was in college, I had this class that I really loved. Well, we completed the syllabus the way a professor showed us the first time, but every one of us was learning a different thing, even if we were following the same topics, weekly topics, because we went to our houses and searched for our own resources, references, and we came up with our own essays, and we share our work in class. But he never gave us any, if the topic was, I don't know, socialization, right, in education, we didn't have a clue of what was that. So we had to interpret what was that. So we had that opportunity to give our work our own style, personality.
Yeah.
And that was
another
my experience as a student.
No, go ahead, Durley.
Excuse me?
Another important thing, sorry, Viviana, for interrupting.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Another thing that is quite important, and I have realized during this time, is that communication with your students is key. I mean, you are always be asking like, how are you feeling? How are you doing this activity? and they are going to give you clues about how to manage them, because finally they are the ones that are applying what you're trying to create. Yeah, so they can give you like a really nice feedback, and also you are creating like that critical thinking culture. Like, okay, if I'm doing this, I can do it better if the teacher do this. Yeah, and that way we can improve also our teaching methodology.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, June. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Viv. Thank you, Darley, and thank you, Daniela, for joining us today. It's been a cool conversation. I really like this. And like I said, the English group is different because it's a smaller kind of around the coffee table conversation. And the Spanish one isn't bad. It's
difficult to scale up.
It's much more hectic.
Experience.
Yeah, and Viv, you were commenting about that last week as well.
It was so funny because I can see the difference. Really? So in the Spanish one, it's like pretty organized, like let's do this, let's discuss this. And here it's like, okay, what did you think?
No, that was Viv.
It's more
Viv organized us last week.
I'm sorry. I'm
chaotic.
Control.
I'm chaotic. And it was good. It worked really well. And I really appreciated that last week, Viv. So it was good.
That was
and I was low energy
give the
last week, so
opportunities
you really helped me
to
last
everybody.
week, for sure. And we're all dealing with this, that we get low energy on some days.
But you can flip that course. You can divide it in groups. We can break down, because it would be better than being together. I have realized that we work better in the small groups like this one than in the big ones, because in big ones we can participate as we want to participate because of many things.
Harder. It's a little bit harder, for sure. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to cut out the video recording now.
Okay.
And I'll see everyone next week who's joining us again. Thanks for those that are watching.